The lobby smelled like eucalyptus and sterilized air. Soft piano music played somewhere overhead. The receptionist barely looked up as the man stepped inside. His coat was old, not torn but threadbare at the cuffs. His shoes scuffed, one sole slightly unglued at the edge. He didn't carry a bag, just a folder tucked beneath one arm. "Excuse me," he said quietly. The receptionist tapped her keyboard a little louder than necessary. "Appointments only. I have one." She gave him a glance this time, just enough to assess. Unshaven. No visible ID badge. Not the typical clientele. "What name?" "Dr. Alan Brooks." Her fingers paused, then resumed. "There's no Brooks on today's schedule." He didn't argue, just nodded, then moved to one of the cushioned chairs and sat. The receptionist watched him for a moment, then picked up the phone. A security guard appeared 5 minutes later. "You lost, sir?" he asked, his tone firm but not rude. Alan looked up. "No. This is a private clinic." "I know," the receptionist added. "He says he's a doctor, but he's not on the schedule." Alan didn't flinch. "I'm happy to wait," he said. The security guard looked unsure, but nodded. "Just stay right there." Alan nodded once, and waited. It didn't take long. Whispers started from the far side of the room. A woman in a designer jacket leaned toward her husband. "He doesn't look well," she murmured, eyes flicking toward Alan. The husband shrugged without looking. "Probably wandered in." A nurse passed by and paused, her smile fading slightly when she saw him. She turned back to the receptionist. "Who's the guy?" "No idea. Says he's a doctor." The nurse raised an eyebrow. "In that coat." They both laughed softly. Alan sat motionless. His folder rested on his lap. He didn't open it. He didn't check his phone. Just watched the hallway, like he was waiting for someone specific. A small boy seated across from him kept peeking over the magazine in his hands. His mother eventually noticed. "Don't stare," she whispered. But the boy didn't stop. Alan noticed, and smiled just barely. The boy smiled back. The mother gently pulled her son's hand down, whispering again, but this time with a glance of her own. Alan returned to stillness. He wasn't angry, just waiting, but the air in the room had shifted. Quiet discomfort now hummed alongside the piano music. He was disrupting nothing, yet somehow everything. It was nearly 20 minutes before someone approached. A nurse, not the one who laughed earlier, walked up with a tablet in her hand. She stood in front of Alan, uncertain. "Sir," she began, "I just want to clarify. You said your name was Dr. Brooks." He nodded. She checked the screen again. "We don't have a Dr. Brooks expected today." Alan said nothing at first. Then, calmly, "I'm not here for a patient appointment." Her brow furrowed. Then, "May I ask why you're here?" "To observe." The answer caught her off guard. "Observe what?" Alan glanced around, at the front desk, at the room, then back at her. "The environment." The nurse shifted. "Are you with administration?" "In a way." She didn't like the vagueness. That much was clear. "Sir, I'm going to need to ask." Before she could finish, a voice called from the hallway. "Alan?" Everyone turned. A man in a lab coat stepped into the room. Late 40s. Confident. A stethoscope slung around his neck like an accessory. He smiled as he walked toward Alan. "You're early," the man said, extending a hand. Alan rose, taking it in a firm shake. "I wanted to see how things run when no one's expecting me." The nurse looked between them. The doctor's face shifted from warmth to a hint of worry. Alan reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a card. Handed it to the nurse. Her eyes scanned it, then widened. Her posture changed instantly. "Dr. Alan Brooks," she read aloud, her voice quieter now. "Chief Medical Officer, East Region." The laughter at the front desk stopped. The woman in the designer coat turned fully now, eyes wide. Alan simply nodded. "Thank you," he said to the nurse, and walked down the hall with the other doctor, leaving the waiting room in silence. The hallway was bright and clean. Polished floors, abstract art, the kind of place built to feel expensive. Alan walked beside Dr. Singh, the regional director. The man spoke quickly now, words spilling out like he was catching up. "We weren't expecting you until Thursday," he said, trying to keep his tone casual. "Would have arranged a tour, a full briefing." "That's why I came today," Alan said quietly. Singh glanced at him, then nodded. He understood. They passed several nurses who straightened when they saw Alan. None had greeted him earlier in the lobby. Now they smiled. Some nodded. One even offered a too cheerful "Good morning, doctor." Alan didn't return it. They reached the elevator. Singh tapped the button, then cleared his throat. I take it the lobby didn't go smoothly. Alan didn't respond. The elevator arrived with a soft chime. They stepped in. Alone. I'd like to visit each department, Alan said. No announcements. No rush. Of course. The doors closed. Alan looked ahead, hands clasped in front of him. You've had 3 patient complaints about front desk interactions in the past 6 months, he said evenly. One of them used the word demeaning. Another wrote dismissive, like I didn't belong there. Singh shifted uncomfortably. I read the reports, Alan continued. But reports only show you what people are willing to admit in writing. The elevator stopped at the 4th floor. Alan didn't move. He just looked at Singh. And now I've seen what they didn't write. The doors opened, and he stepped out. The 4th floor was quieter. Private rooms lined the hallway, each with a frosted glass nameplate beside the door. This was where VIP patients stayed, those who paid for privacy, discretion, and attention. Alan moved slowly, pausing occasionally to glance through the small observation windows. A nurse passed him with a tablet in hand, gave a polite smile, then moved on. She didn't recognize him. Or maybe she didn't want to. Singh trailed a step behind, his usual confident posture slightly diminished. In room 403, Alan paused. Inside, a man in his 60s lay in bed. Thin. Pale. Reading something on a tablet. No visitors. A nurse entered the room without knocking. She adjusted the 4, spoke quickly, then turned to leave. The man tried to say something, but she was already gone. Alan watched. Singh tried to explain. That patients had a rough attitude with staff. Difficult man? Alan said nothing. They walked on. At room 407, they passed a young woman in a wheelchair. She was being wheeled back from testing. The orderly pushing her didn't speak, didn't make eye contact. Alan did. Morning, he said gently. She looked up startled, then gave a soft, grateful nod. It was the only acknowledgement she'd received in the hallway. Singh began to say something, but Alan raised one hand, silencing him without words. Alan wasn't collecting notes. He was collecting moments. Every silence, every clip tone, every avoided glance. This was how a place felt when no one thought they were being watched. And he was watching everything. Down the hall, they passed a door marked staff only. Alan stopped. I'd like to step inside, he said. Singh hesitated. It's just the lounge. That's fine. Inside, the room was modest. A coffee machine. 2 round tables. A bulletin board with outdated notices. 3 nurses sat around one of the tables, laughing softly over something on a phone. They went quiet when the door opened. Alan didn't speak right away. He stepped in and scanned the room. Looked at what was posted. Read the names on a duty roster tacked to the wall. One of the nurses stood. Can we help you? Alan turned to her. No. Just observing. Her eyes narrowed slightly. Are you with administration? Alan tilted his head. Something like that. Singh finally stepped in behind him. The nurses recognized him immediately and straightened in their chairs. One whispered something to the others. Alan caught it. He's the one from the lobby. Another whispered back. That's the new guy? Alan turned slightly toward them but didn't confront. Instead, he pointed to a whiteboard labeled concerns. It was blank. This ever get used? He asked. One nurse shook her head. We tried, but she glanced at Singh. It didn't go anywhere. Alan nodded once, then walked to the board, picked up the dry erase marker hanging below it, wrote slowly in bold letters. What happens when no one is looking? He capped the pen, turned back to them, and said quietly, start thinking about your answer. Then left the room without waiting for a response. They were back on the main floor now. The receptionist stiffened the moment she saw them. She had seen the badge earlier when the nurse dropped it on her desk after Alan left the waiting room. She didn't smile this time. Alan didn't look at her. Instead, he turned to Singh. I'll need access to your staff records. Everyone who works the front desk, nurses, even part-time aides. Singh nodded. Understood. Alan pulled out his phone. Dialed. Brooks, he said after a beat. Yes. I'm at the Westview site now. He paused, listening. Correct. I'll need a formal audit. Front-end practices, intake behavior, and staff incident reports. Request patient satisfaction surveys from the last 2 years. Singh stood silently beside him. No, I'm not asking for permission. I'm informing you, Alan said into the phone, calm as ever. We've got a culture problem. He ended the call. A few feet away, the same small boy from earlier in the waiting room stared up at him. His mother followed his gaze, then looked away quickly when she saw Alan notice her. Alan crouched slightly, giving the boy a nod. The boy smiled again. Alan's tone softened. Take care of your mom, okay? The boy nodded seriously. Alan rose and walked past the desk without a glance. Behind him, the receptionist finally lowered her eyes. She understood now. They convened in a small conference room just after noon. Department heads, floor supervisors, senior nurses, admin coordinators, 12 people in total. All had received the urgent notice barely 30 minutes before. Some entered with confusion, others with tension in their shoulders. Alan stood at the head of the table, not in a suit, still in that same worn coat, sleeves pushed back now. No PowerPoint, no notepads, just his presence. Singh took the seat closest to him. Alan began without preamble. I came here unannounced for a reason. No one moved. I needed to see how this clinic treats people who don't look like money. A silence followed, not hostile but uncomfortable. He let it stretch. In the lobby, I was ignored. At best, mistrusted. At worst, a woman across the table cleared her throat. There are protocols. Alan cut in, his tone still calm. Protocols that change depending on who's asking. She looked down. I watched a nurse walk out of a room without letting a patient finish a sentence. Another cleared his throat. I saw a woman in a wheelchair pushed down a hallway like luggage. Alan scanned the room. Some of you have been here a long time. I don't doubt your skills. But somewhere along the way, the mission got blurry. Still no one spoke. Alan leaned forward slightly. Let me make this clear. We don't get to choose who deserves respect. That's not medicine. That's bias. I shifted around the table. I'm not here to shame anyone. I'm here to fix a problem. And the first step is admitting there is one. He stepped back. Questions? No one raised a hand. Only stillness. And the start of something shifting. Word spread quickly. By the next morning, every department knew what had happened. They didn't have the full story, just fragments. Enough to know that someone had mistaken the new chief medical officer for a drifter. Enough to know he had been watching. And remembering. The front desk staff spoke in quieter tones. Smiles became more frequent, if a bit forced. Nurses double-checked charts and greeted patients with practiced warmth. But it wasn't fear driving the change. It was something else. Reflection. In the cafeteria, a physician assistant folded her tray and sat beside a younger nurse. I heard what he wrote on the whiteboard, she said. The nurse nodded. It's still there. They both stared at their coffee cups. What happens when no one is looking, the nurse repeated. Neither had an answer. Across the clinic, Singh walked the hallways with a different pace. Not rushed. Not performative. Intentional. He peeked into room 403 again. This time, the nurse knocked before entering. And waited for a response. The man inside looked surprised, but pleased. He smiled faintly. In the staff lounge, someone had erased the whiteboard message. But not before another nurse rewrote it in smaller letters in the corner. Just 4 words now. We're always seen. Alan watched from his temporary office, a quiet room facing the main entrance. Patients walked in. Some were greeted. Some were not. But fewer were ignored. And that mattered. Alan left without a formal goodbye. No all-staff email. No handshake tour. Just a quiet walk through the lobby, same coat, same scuffed shoes. The receptionist looked up, her eyes meeting his this time. She stood as if to say something. He nodded once. It was enough. Outside, the small boy from earlier was back, this time holding his mother's hand, waiting for a rideshare. He spotted Alan and tugged gently. The mother looked up, tense for a second, then softened. Hello again, she said. Alan crouched beside the boy. Still taking care of her? The boy grinned. Yeah. Alan smiled. Then to the mother, quietly, he noticed everything. Even when others didn't. She nodded, eyes a little damp. He rose, gave the boy a small wave, and turned toward the lot. At the door, Singh caught up. Dr. Brooks, he said, almost breathless. We're making changes. I want you to know that. Alan looked at him. I'll know, he replied. Singh hesitated. Why didn't you announce who you were? At the start. Alan studied him a moment. Because respect shouldn't depend on who someone is, he said. It should be there before you know. And with that he left. No fanfare. No speech. Just a shift in silence. That would echo for a long time. In the way people spoke. In the way they paused. And finally saw.